Thank you so much for coming. My name is Teresa Moran, and I am the director of the Food Studies theme. And I'd like to welcome you to this very special evening with our extraordinary speaker, Dr. Vandana Shiva. It's such an honor to have Dr. Shiva here with us. Her work as an environmental and food scholar, writer, and activist especially resonates with the challenges our region faces. I'd like to first acknowledge the partners who made Dr. Shiva's visit here possible. Lorraine McCosker, where are you, Lorraine? Lorraine spearheaded the initiative to bring Dr. Shiva to campus, along with the Food Studies theme. And our other co-sponsors for this event include, bear with me, the Ohio University Kennedy Lecture Series, the Common Experience Project on Sustainability, Environmental Studies, the Food Matters Student Club, the Sustainability theme, the Wealth and Poverty theme, the War and Peace theme, the Department of Classics and World Religions, the Department of Geography, the Department of Philosophy, the Office of Sustainability, the Center for International Studies, and the School of Communication Studies. In addition, our community partners, our Athens community partners, include the Appalachian Ohio Sierra Club and Mrs. Marianne Flournoy. I'd like to remind you that following Dr. Shiva's Q&A, you are all invited to a reception in the lounge outside the theater, catered by Restaurant Salam. Dr. Shiva will hold a book signing. Please make sure also to visit the Community Food Initiative's Ridge and Hollow Seed Saving Table, the Food Studies Table, and the Environmental Studies Table. And now I'd like to turn the evening over to Dr. David Discutner, Interim President of Ohio University, to formally introduce Dr. Shiva. We are greatly honored to have Interim President Discutner here with us tonight. His illustrious career at Ohio University has included him holding many positions, including a Dean of University College and Executive Vice Provost. Throughout his service at Ohio University, Dr. Discutner has championed many facets of education and supported experiential learning and co-curricular activities programs, such as the Common Experience Project on Sustainability. And now I give you David Discutner, Interim President, Ohio University, with remarks to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Vandana Shiva. Dr. Discutner.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I'd like you to indulge me for 2 or 3 minutes because I want to talk just a little bit about what a privilege it is to be at a university and to work in higher education. Just last Thursday, I went to the Baker Peace Conference, and we had a young man, very young man, earned his PhD in Oxford in philosophy and history, writes for The Economist. His name was Arkady Ostrovsky. And to be able to share a dinner table with him and talk with him about the state of affairs, and particularly when it comes to Russia and the United States, and to see this man's humor at the same time as insight and genuine curiosity about this region and the challenges of this region was nothing short of remarkable. 15 minutes ago, I left the company of Wesley Lowery. Wesley Lowery is 25 years old. He's a graduate of the Scripps College of Communication. He's already won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on Ferguson. And more importantly, although it's hard to say more importantly, he's finished a book called They Can't Kill Us All about police violence in the United States and about the obscuring of the record of that violence. It was a conversation that will stick with me for many, many days. I knew Wesley as a student here, just an astonishingly smart young man. But he is influencing public policy and he's influencing the public's understanding and ultimately contributing to the betterment of our society. two wonderful experiences, and we're going to have a wonderful experience tonight with Dr. Shiva as well. I want to also extend my own thanks. Years and years ago, it seems like I was 40, but I think I was more in my late 50s, Lorraine McCosker and Nancy Manring, among others in the room, worked on this common experience of sustainability. We tried to convert the Common Reading Project to something that really was smart and effective. Nancy Manring and Lorraine McCosker were an incredible duo, and we're in this room tonight talking about the common experience of sustainability and set up the extraordinary work that Arts and Sciences has done and Teresa has done on food studies because of the work of those two women. And I really think Nancy, if she's not here, but I know Lorraine is, please give them both one more round. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. This is going to be an extraordinarily engaging evening with Dr. Shiva. Her talk is entitled Growing Local Food Resilience, a Response to the Global Industrial Food System. Tonight's presentation is going to look at how the global food system is inextricably linked to our local economic and social well-being, and it's going to remind us that rediscovering and promoting native and local food sources can offer remedy to threats from global industrial agricultural systems. This presentation will inform the Ohio and Athens communities about the challenges facing local food systems, which can be influenced both positively and negatively by the daily food choices that we all make. Our speaker for this evening, Dr. Vandana Shiva, will identify food and agriculture as a critical component to environmental threats and to potential solutions. And she will make the argument that basic human rights include access to healthy, safe food and a sustainable environment for all. It is now my great honor to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva is an internationally known author and activist on food biodiversity. She was trained as a physicist at the University of Punjab and completed her PhD on the hidden variables and non-locality in quantum theory at the University of Western Ontario, Canada. Dr. Shiva later shifted to interdisciplinary research in science, technology, and environmental policy, which she carried out at the Indian Institute of Science and the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore, India. Dr. Shiva combines intellectual inquiry of the highest order with courageous activism, and her work spans teaching at universities worldwide, all the way to working with citizens in rural India. Time magazine identified Dr. Shiva as an environmental hero in 2003, and Asia Week has called her one of the 5 most influential communicators in Asia. As in 2010, November, Forbes magazine identified Dr. Shiva as one of the 7 most powerful women on the globe. Through her books, Biopiracy, Stolen Harvest, and Water Wars, Dr. Shiva has made visible, let me say that again, made visible the social, economic, and ecological costs of corporate-led globalization. She chairs the Commission on the Future of Food set up by the region of Tuscany in Italy. Dr. Shiva is a board member of the International Forum on Globalization, otherwise known as IGF, and she's a member of the steering committee of the Indian People's Campaign against the WTO. Internationally, Dr. Shiva serves on Prince Charles' expert group on sustainable agriculture, and she is a member of President Zapatero's scientific committee in Spain. Dr. Shiva advises governments worldwide and is currently working with the government of Bhutan to make Bhutan 100% organic. She is also working with the governments of Tuscany and Rome to create a livable future for young people in these times of crises. We are ever so fortunate to have Dr. Shiva with us here at Ohio University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Vandana Shiva.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the interim president. Thank you to Teresa and all the wonderful community members and students and faculty who have worked together to organize my trip, which is not just this lecture. I've had amazing meals. I've realized that you have a vibrant local food economy, and because of that, you have a local vibrant community. And most other communities keep grumbling about how bad things are, and you just create the alternative. And I've had a lot of taste of the alternative. So to all the amazing Village Bakery and Casanova and the Bodhi Guest House, where I'm staying, thank you for creating a world. That's the only kind of world we should be living in. We have a very ancient text that, interestingly, is only about food. It's called the Taittiriya Upanishad. And it says, everything is food, everything is something else is food. You know, we've been brought up with this silly hierarchical thing where man sits on top. But I think bacteria sit above us. There are multiple ways in which local food economies are the only place to build multiple resiliences that we need for these times. We need ecological resilience because we are living in times of massive ecological destruction, most of it related to an industrial food system. We need health resilience. Again, the disease epidemics, the malnutrition, and hunger are also related to that same industrial system. We need economic resilience because we are now in an economy which the Occupy movement named 1% versus the 99%, but actually it's 0.00001%. We definitely need political resilience, which in other terms is called democracy. Real democracy. And when the representative democracy is no more representative, or has become, as I say, no more of the people, by the people, for the people, but of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations, then you need to cultivate political resilience. And I've written in my book, Earth Democracy, that doesn't grow top down. Bombs can be dropped top down. Democracy can be dismantled top down. But real democracy only grows from the ground up, like food. And finally, I believe social resilience we need in these times because we're living in times where society is being ruptured, not just ecosystems. 75% of the destruction of the soil, of the water, more than 90% of the biodiversity is related to industrial systems of food production. So if you want to look at the data on all of this, footnoted with reference from UN treaties, you can go to my book, Who Really Feeds the World, which I wrote for the Expo in Milan 2 years ago, which was the first expo dedicated to the theme of food. You know, usually expos are for automobiles and the latest gadget, and this expo was feeding the world. Partly because it was in Italy. But the problem was the financial crisis took place between the time they started planning and the time it was organized. And I remember I had to inaugurate the biodiversity garden of the expo. And it had shrunk in size from what they had planned. And meantime, there were these giant pavilions of Coca-Cola on one side and McDonald's on the other. And I said, what happened to you Italians? And they said, we ran out of money. And that is the big resilience we need, that running out of money should not be fear, because, a source of fear, because the true wealth is in nature and in our communities. So soil, there are many ways in which the soil is devastated by industrial farming. It's devastated by the very fact that applying chemical fertilizers kills the life of the soil. It's devastated by the fact that these giant machineries compacting The monocultures are leading to wind and soil and rain erosion. And chemical fertilizers are becoming a very, very big source of both water pollution as well as water depletion. So when I did my book, as you heard, I thought I'd spend my life with the quanta, If the best brains of our world have spent the last century puzzling over what does quantum theory really mean, I said, I can spend a lifetime on that. But it was 1984 that forced me to start looking at agriculture. This was the year when two things happened in India. In the summer of 1984, the military army was sent to the Golden Temple, the sacred shrine of the Sikhs, because there had been protests, and the leader of the protests was in the Golden Temple. That same year, we had the leak of a pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide. 30,000 people had been killed in the violence of Punjab. 7,000 people were killed on the 2nd December night with a gas leak. Thousands have been killed since then, and I've been back again and again on the anniversaries of the Bhopal disaster. And I remember particularly about 3 years ago, where the children of Bhopal are now in their 20s. And they were born crippled. And that evening was dedicated to these children creating their evening. Trying to dance when they couldn't even stand. Trying to sing when they couldn't even speak. But it was a very touching evening. So the Bhopal tragedy is not yet over. It continues. And by the end of this, I said, what is it about this kind of agriculture? Especially when the Green Revolution, which was chemical farming, introduced to our parts of the world in 1965, it was given a Nobel Peace Prize. And I didn't find much peace around. So I decided to study what was going on. I was, in those days, working for the United Nations University, based in Tokyo. I was doing a program for them. And I said, I have to look at this. Something's strange in terms of the big narrative and the reality on the ground. So I did my book on the violence of the Green Revolution. And I still couldn't figure out why things were going so wrong in India, because the narrative was this has created rich farmers in America and it's produced huge amounts of food. And it wasn't until I read Wendell Berry and his Unsettling of America that I realized the same things that happened here. So just like you think India became super rich with the Green Revolution, we were made to believe the American farmers became super rich, and nobody tells the story of the disappearing farmer. Punjab soil today are dead. The water is disappearing very fast. There's a recent NASA report on how much the groundwater has been mined. You need 10 times more water to produce the same amount of food, just because of the use of chemicals. And then the water that runs out is polluted water, creating the dead zones everywhere. In terms of biodiversity, the Green Revolution or industrial farming breeds for chemicals. And therefore, by necessity, it breeds uniformity. Because all external input systems must be monocultures. Whereas internal input systems, self-organized systems, emerge towards diversity and multifunctionality, including us as human beings. There was a lot of conversation about how the small farms that are trying to create an alternative here, there's always a partner who's having to do other work, which is not a problem, really. Multifunctionality of a farm includes different people doing different things. Why do we impose the model of uniformity on ourselves, which is what has brought so much non-sustainability to industrial agriculture? And There were lots of debates in the 70s and 80s about how this is about a distribution problem and not a production problem, because we are growing enough food. But the distribution and the production are linked together. When you grow food ecologically, you have local distribution. Or when you build local food economies, you will grow diversity. Because a local community, you can't all grow soya in all your farms and say, here, eat soya. You can't do that. So you've got to grow the different vegetables, you've got to do the cheese, you've got to have the little mills, and the diversity becomes part of it. So local and diverse go together, the decentralized and the diverse go together. On the other hand, the uniformity and the monocultures go hand in hand with globalized trade. And global trade is hugely incompetent. We have eaten 10,000 species of plants over history. We are trading in about 12, and that's what's growing. And when that's what's growing, that's what people are eating, which has its own problems. At the end of the day, the vulnerability that's being created ecologically on a planetary level is very much a result of this drive towards chemical inputs and industrial monocultures linked to commodity production. And when I wrote Soil Not Oil in 1999, it was before the Copenhagen summit, I said, why isn't nobody talking about the agriculture piece of climate change? And that was because agriculture was dismembered. Part of it was converted to land use, part of it was converted to transport, part of it was converted into industry. When you add all the figures, at that time I'd assessed 40 to 45%. Now the figures are very clear. It's about 50% of the 3 big greenhouse gases that are destabilizing our climate come from an industrial globalized system. And that's carbon dioxide, of course, directly from fossil fuels, but also indirectly from the fact that the fertilizer industry is actually a fossil fuel-based industry. 1 kilogram of nitrogen fertilizer requires an energy equivalent of 2 liters of diesel. 1 kilogram of phosphate requires half a liter of diesel. The energy consumed during fertilizer manufacture was equivalent to 191 billion liters of diesel in 2000 and will be 277 billion in 2030. And once you've created this commodity system, then you need those silly Walmart trucks. I don't find anything more unaesthetic than these giant trucks moving across countries. And it's called efficient logistics. In India's entire economy is being dismantled in order to just serve this long-distance trade system. The nitrogen oxides from these fertilizers are 300 times more deadly for climate instability than carbon dioxide. And then there's methane, which comes from 2 big sources. One is the factory farms, and the other is the food waste. Because when your system is that globalized, food waste is built into it for 2 reasons. The first reason is that it requires uniformity. And I have seen areas where, there's fruit piled on the ground. And I ask, why are you not selling this? It was rejected because it wasn't the perfect size and shape. I got a letter from South African farmers who said, suddenly, our apples are not selling because Walmart changed the size of its trucks and therefore has changed the size of the apples we must grow to maximize the efficiency of packing into those trucks. They tried to make, I remember once, they tried to make square tomatoes. Because, the rounds waste a little bit space. So make square. It failed. I think it was a Berkeley program. It absolutely failed. As did another tomato designed for transport and long shelf life, and not for freshness, and not for good eating, which was actually the first GMO food Nobody protested against it. It went out and failed because it was so useless to eat. It was called the flavor saver. And basically, they removed the antisense gene, they called it, which would show the wrinkles when a tomato was rotting and would make it look fresh, but it was still a 6-month-old tomato. You know? And if it was thrown against that wall, it would bounce right back. Now, do you want to cook with something that's like that? It won't dissolve. I mean, even now, I say, when we make our curries, we chop the onions, we chop the tomatoes, and it used to dissolve. But the new varieties that are designed both for processing with large pulp as well as for long transport are very hard. So I call the flavor saver technology the Botox tomato. Like people don't want to show their wrinkles, and they put these paralysis injections, and this industry is just spreading everywhere. And for me, there's no face more beautiful than lines showing how much you've lived and how much you have to give to society. So when you shift to local systems and diversified systems and ecological systems, you start to do the opposite. Instead of depleting the water, you start building up the water. And you build up the water not just in the ground. Our water level on our farm, the Navdanya movement that I started in 1987, eventually we started a teaching farm. We have courses, we have interns coming, we have an Earth University, and I hope some of you will someday visit. But our water level in the 20 years we have farmed has come up by 60 feet. 60 feet. Everywhere else is going down. And the reason it goes down is because the soil is holding more water, and therefore more infiltration is taking place, and we are withdrawing much less because the soil, having more water holding capacity, requires far less irrigation. We've reduced irrigation 75% while growing more food, because we actually monitor the production. 0.5% increase in organic matter in the soil can increase water holding capacity of soil 80,000 liters per hectare. We don't see soil as the biggest reservoir we have, because we got so used to the concrete reservoir that are now running empty all over the world when a drought comes. In terms of soil, we've just completed a study comparing the chemical farms in our valley and the organic farms under very different crops. And I'm personally just so excited. We are made to believe that nitrogen fertilizers increase nitrogen in the soil. Well, it's gone down by 7% compared to the control, which is the uncultivated area. And on the organic farms, it's gone up 21%. The whole industrial revolution was built on NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. In terms of phosphorus, it's gone up 63% on our farms. Potassium, it's gone down 22% on the chemical farms and gone up between 14 to 84, because different cropping systems on different soils, of course, make a difference. Magnesium, which is now being implicated in a lot of attention deficit disorder, lack of magnesium, has gone down 17% because of chemical farming, increased 14% because of organic. Iron has gone down 12%. But the most impressive part is the soil organic matter. It's gone down 14% in the chemical farming and has increased 29 to 99% through organic farming. And a living soil is based on giving back to the earth what she gave you. Albert Howard called this the law of return. You cannot cheat the earth. You cannot cheat nature. And this becomes even more important when you think of the issue of health. After all of those micronutrients and trace elements that the living soil is creating for you. Because, the other thing that goes with industrial farming is a mechanistic idea. You have input and you have output. But of course, output is not nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Yeah. The plants are doing their own thing by fixing carbon. Most of the plant material is carbon. It's living carbon. But just like plants are making their own nutrition, the soil organisms are making their own nutrition. Let me just share with you the amazing detail on the earthworm, Poor Darwin, it's only his struggle for survival and competition between species that gets remembered. But he wrote amazing books. One was on the earthworm. It was called The Earthworm Mold. And in it he wrote that when our story is told, we'll realize that the earthworm had more to contribute to human history than any other species. The earthworm is able to multiply the nutrition, not because it eats that much, but it creates it in its gut. All it eats is a bit of minerals and a bit of leaves. And then it gives you, I call it the more efficient fertilizer factory than blasting fossil fuels at high temperature. But that rich nutrition that the soil creates and the soil organisms create, and then your plants create with their diversity, is the difference between the serious diseases, micronutrient diseases we are getting. There's a recent study out from, a meta-study from the British Journal of Nutrition published it, 60% more beneficial nutrients in organic foods. 1995, I started to study the biodiverse outputs of farms. And it began with this little survey thing I designed for our farmers with a huge table, just calculate everything you grow and put it in. And out of this biodiversity-based productivity, we started to assess not the monoculture commodity yield, but the biodiverse outputs. We then converted this more recently into assessing nutrition per acre, not yield per acre, because yield only measures the commodity that leaves the farm, not the health of the farm, not the biodiverse produce, definitely not the health of the farming community. So I said, let's measure health per acre and nutrition per acre, which we did. From the 200 farms we'd studied, if we grew local food systems with diversity, we could feed 2 times the world population. Now, a very common slogan is, there'll be 9 billion, and then we got to have GMOs. No, if we're going to be 9 billion, the way to go is local, small, diverse. Because small farms produce more. Just look at the losses with chemical farming. And this is UK data and US data. Calcium has gone down 29% in the US, 19% in the UK. Magnesium down in the foods. This is in the foods, not in the soil anymore. 21% magnesium loss, 35% in UK. Potassium, 6% less, 14% less. Iron deficiencies, 32%, 22%. We are producing nutritionally empty commodities. And anyone who's bringing those nutritionally empty commodities should be punished for creating malnutrition. We talked a lot about how we need to change this crazy system where the bad food gets rewarded with subsidies, incentives, tax breaks, and the good food gets punished. Carefully, we have to do the actual sums. But not just do the sums, we've got to change our thinking. Over the years, I first and foremost think every small farmer and every local food community is a soil conserver and a soil rejuvenator. They're water conservers and builders of water and builders of soil. They are actually the biggest answer to climate change, because while the emissions might be 50% from industrial farming, through the photosynthesis of plants and building back organic matter in the soil, we have a 100% solution to the built-up emissions. This was done for the Paris Convention, and the figures are there. And the French government actually picked this issue up. They couldn't bring it into the treaty, but they have an initiative on soil organic matter as a climate solution. We have a whole network on this is the solution we should be working towards. When you grow, I mean, so many of you are seed savers, because all the industrial seeds are bred for either chemical inputs or uniformity, our seeds are bred for nourishment. They're bred for taste. You know, when all you're going to do is trade, why do you care about taste? You don't care about taste. I remember once they left me a big basket of fruit. I bit into the peach, had no taste. Then I bit into the plum. It had no taste, but it tasted just the same, empty. And then I bit into the apple, and it was the same, empty. I said, my God, they've stopped fruits tasting. You know, an apple is no more an apple, a mango is no more a mango, banana is no more a banana. Come to India, eat the 150 varieties of banana they still have in Kerala. So we breed for taste, quality, nourishment, resilience. I would ask you all to go to either the Navdanya website or the Seed Freedom website, and you will see a manifesto we did on the law of the seed. This was, you know, they were really rushing through making local seeds illegal all over the world. And I brought together the lawyers and the scientists and the breeders, and we said, let's learn from the seed how the seed wants to be. Yeah? And write a law not in terms of what industry wants seed to be, but what is the yearning of the seed. And it is diversity, it is resilience. Seed doesn't want to collapse the minute there's a heavy rain. It doesn't want to get wiped out when there's a drought. Resilience is built into the seeds we have developed, but also it's built into farming with open source seeds, open pollinated seeds. And we call this evolutionary breeding. In fact, we offer a course every September on the A to Z of agroecology and organic food systems. And the first week was on living seed, the second week was on living soil, the third week is on living food, and the final week is on living food economies. Now, in terms of living food, again, the big issue that's coming out is we knew as ecologists that we need diversity for resilience. The soil systems are now teaching us that soils with diversity are more fertile, but they are also more resilient. You know, the new thing scientists have figured out is our gut has diversity. Because they thought it's just it's just a transport mechanism. But it's not. They're calling it the second brain. Trillions of microbes, hundreds of species, 7 million genes. We are only 10% us. And we can't cheat those microbes. They need diversity. So in our ancient Ayurvedic system, it was always said, you must eat the 6 tastes for a healthy diet. You know, the Mediterranean diet is celebrated in a huge way because it's a little more diverse than the North European diet. But with the amount of microbes, each of them with a sensor, you can't cheat them. You can't put a Coke Zero and tell the microbes pretend it's zero. No, it's toxic something. It's you know. And the microbes know. And the fact that we have a disease epidemic, whether it's obesity and diabetes, or which are metabolic disorders, or it's the fact that our cells no longer know how to function. And the economy functioning like a cancer cell, it doesn't know when to stop growing. Or it'd be hypertension, or it'd be cardiovascular diseases. These are often referred to as lifestyle diseases. I've started calling them food-style diseases. They come from the kind of food we're eating. And the whole soil to gut to brain connection that is now being confirmed by independent science can be denied by manipulating science, can be denied by putting out propaganda, it's safe, like this whole issue of glyphosate is safe. 40,000 kidney failure deaths in Sri Lanka, they banned Roundup. The WHO said it's a carcinogen. Monsanto has just lost a case in California where they want to label Roundup as a probable carcinogen. And we organized a Monsanto tribunal last October on World Food Day, bringing together countries, victims, to show how this industrial system in the hands of now a cartel of three. And who is this cartel? They're the cartel that came out of the war. All they knew was how to kill people in concentration camps. All our pesticides are derived from the gases that were made for gassing people in the concentration camps, or the poison gases that were used in the war. And then they developed an entire agriculture paradigm saying you can't grow food without chemicals. And all the literature, when I was doing my Green Revolution book, I couldn't believe the literature on pest control. Every insect is an enemy because every insect is a potential pest. When most of the insects are doing such an important work for us without our pollinators, we'll have no food, 1/3 of the food. We've done experiments and how much are the pollinators contributing? 1/3 is directly a contribution of pollinators. And again, when the whole idea of food producer comes in, I think that's why, don't feel sad that in the economics of the market, things aren't working out. Because in the economics of the earth, when we do things right, the pollinators thrive, the soil organisms thrive. And that is the true economy. I call it the economy of nature. That's where real production takes place, including production of health. And we should start talking of local ecological farmers as our real health insurance. They are our health providers. And those who are using the Roundups and the sprays and the poisons are not just destroying our health. They're wiping out the bees, 75% gone, 90% monarch butterfly gone. On the BT cotton, we've done studies. No pollinators on a single BT cotton plant. You don't find a pollinator because it's releasing a toxin all the time. And while it's destroying the pollinators, it's also destroying our farmers. 300,000 farmer suicides since globalization started. And this logic that every other is an enemy. Every pest is an enemy, every grass is an enemy, every other crop is an enemy. If it's not one of those 12 commodity crops, it's a weed. Go to spray herbicides. I was so happy to have visited the gardens of the university this morning, including the Kenopodium garden. And when I was studying the Green Revolution, one of the things that really hit me was on my mother's farm, in the wheat fields was the Kenopodium, and it's called the batwa, and it's used for all kinds of dishes, and it's hugely nourishing, and you don't have either vitamin A or iron deficiencies if that batwa is available, even if you're the poorest person. And then when they started to do chemical farming, the batwa was declared a weed, and herbicides were sprayed. And then they want to do golden rice in order to have vitamin A. So just let the batwa go back. Let the Kenopodium grow. They want to have a GMO banana for iron deficiency. It would be a pathetic increase from 0.44 milligrams to 2 milligrams. They talk fivefold. Fivefold takes you to 2, when our crops provide us 74, 34, 54, 7,000% more than they'll ever reach. So very often in my debates with the biotech industry, they say, you spread a lot of fear by making people afraid of GMOs. I said, no, you didn't get it. I'm not making anyone afraid. I'm just saying it's a very stupid idea. Because nature gives us so much more. And our options in biodiversity are so much richer. We don't have to go down that toxic route with patents and royalties and all of that. But not only is it stupid, it's highly inefficient. So instead of controlling weeds, Roundup Ready crops have given you super weeds, with half the farmlands of this country devastated. One of the plants that has become a superweed is called the Palmer amaranth. And they're not able to wipe it out. And I was absolutely shocked to read a report jointly sponsored by Bill Gates, who is my next favorite person, and I'm doing a book on him. Bill Gates and DARPA, which is the Defense Research Agency. And it's on gene drives, and one section of it is about exterminating the amaranth because it's become a weed. And so I wrote a comment on this, and you can find it somewhere. And I said, all you have to do is stop using Roundup, and you won't be creating weeds. But more important, the footnote in that section saying there will be a little food security impact on countries like India, which happen to eat amaranth. But in my view, it's not just that we will lose the amaranth, because these gene drives are designed to exterminate a species. I said this extermination mindset is the problem. Because every species on this planet deserves to be on the planet, and if they grow and co-evolve together, each will be balanced. One will never become dominant. In a similar way, in the human community, the idea of extermination, which is setting in very fast, very rapidly, that there are entire peoples who you can say you don't belong on this earth. You don't belong to our country, but you don't belong anywhere. Your president just rang up our prime minister, because both have decided that if you're of a particular faith, you don't have place on this planet. Now, when you grow local food systems, I think the most important resilience we are growing is a political and social resilience to be human. We are cultivating humanity. So 2 years ago, when it was the year of soil, we did a manifesto called Terra Viva, the living soil, because we realized, one, not only that the soils are dying and getting degraded, but that the destruction of soils and ecosystems because of industrial farming is leading to the refugee crisis. Syria's story is so clear. 2009, they had a massive drought. Before that, the Green Revolution-style farming had wiped out their water, desertified their soil. When this drought came, 1 million farmers moved as refugees into the cities. You'll never see the story of 2009. You'll only read after 2011, when it became a war zone. And 150 civilians have just been killed in Mosul again. So the entire industrial agriculture has come from war, is still carrying a militarized mindset, is continuing war against the earth and people. Local ecological farms and local food systems cultivate peace, because they allow people to stay together. So all our communities in Navdanya, there's no problem if someone's a Muslim and someone's a Hindu, because the earth connects you. As earth citizens, you cannot even think the other person is your enemy. As earth citizens, you cannot think that an insect has to be wiped out with a poison. You look for the uncultivated edibles to add to your nourishing diet. So when we were writing this manifesto, we realized that the word human comes from the root humus, which is the Latin word for soil. And even in the Hebrew tradition, Adam, the first man, is merely the expression of our humanity because Adamus is soil. So, growing local food communities helps us remember, A, we are of the earth. We are not separate, we are not masters, we are not owners, we are not conquerors, we can't trash her. We have a duty to care. And again, in this very ancient Upanishad, it says, the highest dharma, and dharma means the right livelihood, the right action, to hold nature and community together. And breaking nature's laws and violating community is a dharma. We don't have a concept of, religion is not dharma. Dharma is the right livelihood, the right action. And the Taittiriya Upanishad says, the highest dharma is the growing and giving of food, of good food, sorry. The highest dharma is the growing and giving of good food, and the highest adharma is growing food with carelessness, and what is the spraying of poisons but a lot of carelessness, and serving bad food. So I have thoroughly enjoyed a very, very dharmic community in my short stay here. But the second aspect of working with the soil is the only place we will recover the capacity to live as one human family in these periods. And that's why I feel the social resilience, the resilience of knowing who we are, that, we eat food from the same earth, same kind of blood that moves in our veins. Our external skin might look a little different, but it's a very thin veneer. And the real stuff is those 90% guys sitting here. And that 90%. Oh, by the way, this morning Edna brought me and she was talking about how she works in the with the Maasai. So in the new studies they're doing on the gut microbiome, you know who has the healthiest gut microbiome? The so-called primitive barbaric societies. The Maasai have amazing gut diversity. So rather than looking at how violent you can be, how much hate you can spread as being civilized and making our countries great again, let's make our gut great again and make our soil great again. And that task is precisely what local food communities do. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva has agreed to answer questions. We have mics at both sides of the theater. So if you could please, if you can, step to the mic or raise your hand, and I'll scurry up to bring you the mic.
There's someone that side already.
Hello. Hi.
So-
Hi. Hello.
Go ahead.
So sorry. My question is, do you believe that ethical consumption and production are possible under capitalism?
Well, I don't begin with abstract thought. Well, just to follow up, capital is derived from kaput. And of course, nowadays we talk of kaput as finished, but it used to mean the number of animals you own. And I think we need to go back to the true wealth, which is the wealth in the land and the wealth in healthy soils and healthy communities. Because this fake wealth has created an economy where 6 years ago it was 388 men controlling half the wealth of the world, dropped to 62 last year. It's down to 8 this year. And how much will it be next year? That's not wealth. That's robbery, fiction, cooking up alternative facts.
Well, my question's about golden rice specifically and GMOs in general. If you read about golden rice, it almost sounds like a good thing. It's got high in beta carotene, a precursor to vitamin A. But I guess, the question is there a way to responsibly or organically raise GMO crops, specifically the golden rice, but in general, without developing monocultures and globalization? I mean, can local farmers grow genetically modified organisms and get away with it? Or are we cheating Mother Nature?
Well, first of all, 90% of the GMO corn and soya grown anywhere in the world, but particularly in this country, is not part of a food system. It's part of a biofuel system and an animal feed system. Yeah? So it should be totally disconnected from saying we're going to feed the world. In terms of its impact on nature, the reason we have an international biosafety protocol, and I served on the United Nations Committee to draft the framework for that, which is a protocol to the Convention on Biological Diversity, Senior President Bush walked out of the Earth Summit saying, I will not allow my biotechnology industry to go down the drain. I would suggest you all see a film called The World According to Monsanto, where there's actually a clip where he's visiting the headquarters of Monsanto and saying, tell me what you want done. I'll do it for you. So as a scientist, I look at what are the possibilities. Here's a new tool being offered to you. I assess that tool according to all the alternatives available. Is it better? As I said, by and large, stupid alternative, because the moringa tree and the fenugreek and the coriander in our curries gives you much more vitamin A. When it was first introduced, I wrote an essay called The Blind Approach to Blindness Prevention. I called it blind because it was not seeing the better, more superior options that are available for providing vitamin A. And when on debates, they accused me of killing 200 million kids. I said, no. We are growing the gardens that provide rich vitamin A and rich iron and rich zinc and rich magnesium and rich everything. We can feed, as I said, 2 times the planet with diversity. And beta-carotene is in so many of our foods. It's just that if you say, I will look only at rice, which is not the richest source of iron, or with beta-carotene, and say, I'm going to engineer this, we haven't managed to stop this experiment. The experiment itself, after 20 years, they started in the year 2000. It's still not delivered. Just read the recent reports from IRRI, the International Rice Research Institute, where the final experiments are being done. And they're saying it's not ready. Agronomically, it's not doing well. So as an experiment, it hasn't delivered. 80 patents are related to it. 80 patents. So they do say, we'll give, when it's developed, we'll give the poorer farmers a little bit of free seed. But they never say we are going to withdraw these patents. And the way these things work these days is they're hoping there'll be enough hunger, there'll be enough vitamin A deficiency, then they're going to go to the World Food Program and say, just buy this, then they're going to make it illegal to buy local rices and grow local rices and say, if you don't grow the golden rice so that the royalties can keep flowing. It is a very, very integrated system. The tool is not separable from the patents. The only reason this tool was deployed was to take patents, was to collect royalties. I was at a meeting where the corporation said it, which is why I save seeds today. It didn't come to me from the skies. I had to find a response. to them wanting to own our seats.
Thank you so much for being here. Just to preface, my name is Alip. I'm a PhD student in sociology of reproduction at University of Cincinnati, and I'm so grateful to get a chance to ask you this question. Something that's come up a lot in my work is sort of this argument that happens that we can solve social problems through like population control of different societies, different groups of people who are sort of expanding outside of what's sustainable. And I feel like so much of what you've talked about today is about how that argument that like we can solve social problems by eliminating people just completely misses the point. So I was just wondering if you could talk about how this idea of seeing the other as the enemy relates to racism and relates also to reproductive justice and food justice. Like, I just kind of want to hear like, you know, like the wisdom. Thank you.
Well, first it all relates by thinking of the world, including women's wombs, as a machine. So when there was the population summit in Egypt, I remember I had to critique the posters which had women's wombs as the population bomb. No, our wombs are not population bombs. Our wombs are where people grow. You know, that's where every one of you was born in your mother's womb. Yeah? Now, why do populations increase or decrease? You know, in your country, you have something called the double income, no kids family. Because either you're too poor and have to do a lot of work, or you're so rich that you can't take time off to have a kid, you know, it interferes. I mean, the whole surrogacy drive, you know, they come to India to rent wombs now, and they've had a problem because a new law has been passed. So this idea that women are unthinking reproductive machines and population just keep growing is not true, because populations come down. You know, in Italy, which is Roman Catholic, they have a decline in population, not because the Pope said to them something and they listened. They didn't listen. But the economy made it impossible to have kids. On the other hand, populations grow when you're uprooted. I have cited 2 cases in my book, Earth Democracy, because this was a question that kept coming to me. In India, the population was stable for centuries, up to 1815, which is when the British came in, changed land laws, overtook the land of the peasantry, etc. So literally just a decade after your university was formed, our population started to increase. And there's a very, very good study done by Mahmood Mamdani, who's now at Columbia. And he's written a very good book on Islam, too, in recent years. Mahmood Mamdani came to India, to the Punjab, the same area where I did my studies. And he's asking a landless peasant, he says, why do you have so many kids? Because the book was on population. And the peasant says, the landlord can just go buy his next tractor. All I can do is have my next kid. Because when you're that precarious, and the economy is so precarious for you, the only thing you have to survive is the hands that you can sell. A kid to go polish shoes, someone else to go get water, someone else to go dig into the garbage. That's how the poor disenfranchised are surviving. Or look at England, and look at the Scottish Highlands. The Highland clearances were related to the enclosures of the commons. That's what led to the population increase. That's what led to the migrations. When I have my little piece of land, I know exactly what it can support. And because we are thinking beings, and all life is intelligent, the bacteria in our gut is intelligent, the soil organisms are intelligent, we know how to make decisions. It's when power is taken away from us, then the intelligent response is to have larger numbers. And Kerala has shown this. Kerala has shown that when you gave land rights and gave 100% literacy and gave all the health security, the population started to come down, because it's insecurity that is at the root of this, and it's security that will solve the instability, not more coercive technological birth control intervention. Talking about our dear Bill Gates, he's now financing a chip for remote control, which will release the chemicals at the right time from a remote control. And when he got into trouble for this, he says the woman will use the remote control. Why would she need a remote control and a chip when she can make a decision straight?
Hi, Dr. Shiva. So, living in a Western society, it's been my experience that many people do not believe that non-human animals have sentience, consciousness, or vibrational frequency, let alone plants and trees. So my question is, how can we raise consciousness compassionately but effectively?
Well, first of all, I really believe that ancient philosophies contribute a lot to recognizing that all life is sentient. And that's what the ancient thought of my land was. It wasn't a recipe to say, go kill somebody. It's also what Buddhism teaches you. On His Holiness's 60th birthday, I had to give a speech in the celebration. And, I was already working on the GMO question and the patent question. And he wrote me this beautiful note in Tibetan, which was then translated for me. He says, every being has a right to happiness. No other being has a right to take the happiness away. That is his comment to patenting and genetic engineering. But I think the second place we need to look at is the new work being done on intelligence. Intelligence, again, it's just derived from the Latin, which is intellegere, the ability to choose. So when bacteria are responding to antibiotics and becoming antibiotic resistant, they're being intelligent. Every cell of our body is intelligent. Every microbe in our gut is intelligent. Every microbe in the soil is intelligent. Look at the mycorrhizae. On its own, it decides where it will pick up nutrition and where it will take it. It is acting with the deepest intelligence. So I really feel that another element of stupidity of the mechanistic paradigm is to have put intelligence in the brains of a few selected men. And we know now brains don't function independent of the body, and because their knowledge was about escape of the body, read Descartes. Escaping the body. Now they want to escape from this earth. They want to spend billions on trying to farm on Mars, rather than just spend a little bit trying to make sure local, small-scale ecological agriculture is supported. But I do want to add one little thing. There's now all this language of you can download your brain into a computer, and then there'll be artificial intelligence will be smarter than us, because one computer won a silly chess game. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if all of our being is intelligent, and if the soil organisms are intelligent, how much intelligence will they download? They can't. It's not downloadable. And of course, even as we talk of a future of the kind you're creating here in this community. Monsanto has just bought up the world's biggest climate data corporation, the world's biggest soil data corporation. It's bought up 16 Silicon Valley firms. It is looking at surveillance software put into drones and spyware put into tractors. Why? Because they want their entire economy to be based on coercion. If you don't, are you paying our royalties? Are you paying? But also the knowledge we could generate as intelligent beings is now becoming a commodity through big data that will be sold back to us. So this makes local farms even more important for the future resilience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. For many of us in this room, I think it's probably safe to say we're already local eaters, maybe even growers. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit tonight about bold next steps, about where your courage has come from, so that youth in this room might garner a sense of action, activism, and what can we do besides self-servingly feed ourselves good food and in the process grow our community. So I want to know where, again, your courage has come from and possibly suggest some next bold steps.
Well, my courage has first come from refusing to be imprisoned in the mental frameworks and paradigms that were designed to control us as women, as human beings. And I have absolutely refused to accept the mechanistic reductionist paradigm and done everything to live in a non-mechanistic way and think in a non-mechanistic way. The second place where courage comes from is the recognition that you're not a little atom floating around alone, but you are interconnected. You're interconnected to the earth. You are interconnected to other members of your community, and that interconnectedness is our true being. I have personally found that every time the violence is overwhelming, recognizing that interconnectedness calls for deeper compassion on our part and deeper love. And all my spirit of resistance has come from the deepest love for the earth and humanity.
Dr. Shiva, thank you so much for having us tonight. We're honored to be with you here. So my name is Mickey Myers, and I've been working on a lot of ecological restoration projects around this region. And what I've noticed is that we often resort to highly militarized methods of eradicating invasive species. Basically, when we're taking out honeysuckle, we often use either fossil fuel-powered machinery or a dab of Roundup on the tops of the honeysuckle plants in order to make sure they don't come back. At the same time, I'm reading your work and wondering how we can avoid this like militarized mindset as we're working on ecological restoration projects, and how can we like mitigate the invasive species that are creating monocultures in our wild spaces while still holding respect for all plants and hopefully removing ourselves from the fossil fuel and Roundup industry.
Well, at least for me, like I said, I don't address constructions. I don't begin with assumptions. I think the place where all of this gets solved is the practice. And I learn so much from the farms of our members in Navdanya and our teaching and research farm, where all these dilemmas we have, how we will balance out, how will the weeds be controlled, it gets sorted out if the intelligence and balance of nature is recognized and respected. We used to have a few pests in the first 2 years, and we used a bit of neem and other ecological pest control systems. After the second year, we've never had any one population of any one insect becoming dominant. They sort it out. They know how to live together. We'd better learn from them.
Hi. So I feel like one of your main propositions is that individual consumer choices have the power to transform the food system, but I was wondering how this could possibly be a viable solution, though, when so many ordinary working class people hardly have enough money to afford enough food to feed their family, let alone have the privilege to choose between different types of food and where their food is coming from. In Appalachia alone, there are extremely high rates of food insecurity and food deserts, and people who can hardly afford enough with the help of food stamps. And so, while I agree with your critiques and your propositions you've made, I feel like we need a solution that's ultimately accessible to everyone, otherwise it's not revolutionary. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we address that issue.
Well, first, your region has the potential to produce food. And I think the region could grow food for all. What's coming in the way are, first, an extractive industry that used people and then threw them away. And I think this idea of disposable people is the biggest danger to humanity right now, because you have an economic system that says 99% of you won't matter. So it isn't intrinsic to the capacity of the earth or the potential of community to have food insecurity and food scarcity or poverty. The second is the fact, and that's the subject of the second book we did, it's called Wealth Per Acre. And part of it was I wanted to take stock of what is the chemical system really costing us. And I began because, we were having so many suicides. I was seeing larger areas of India getting desertified and having huge water scarcities. So we added the figures, and just on social and environmental damage, the figures are $1.2 trillion annually, which is bigger than our GDP. Now add to this the 800 million that gets spent on cancer treatment or diabetes care. You add it all together, it's another trillion. Add to this the fact that it's not the case that artificially cheap food is cheap in and of itself. It's a very costly system. It requires $400 billion to keep afloat in terms of agricultural subsidies. Then you have to have huge amounts of subsidies to make this food available on food stamps or whatever. If that public money was made available to get good food, no one would be hungry. So it's just that we've got used to thinking public money should go to bad food. The poor don't deserve healthy eating. And we locked ourselves into these inevitabilities. But a poor person who's unemployed will only get food against a food stamp. And I remember your secretary, the last secretary, Vilsack, soon after the 2008 crisis, was asked a question. And I was in the conference where this was asked. He said, so many more people are now on food stamps because even the middle class jobs have gone. And will you increase food stamps and decrease the agricultural subsidies to industry? And he says, no, agricultural subsidies to industry are untouchable. And anyway, most of the people in the lines for food stamps are faking poverty. Now, when you've got that kind of thinking that people are dispensable and disposable, you're not going to get those solutions. But the key issue to remember is by buying bad food and getting it to the disenfranchised is a market. It's creating a market. And that same process of tax money could be going to get healthy food to the poorest person. But the next step would be, this earth does not create scarcity. She creates abundance. Communities have never had scarcity because they've shared, they have grown abundance. A system of profits not only creates scarcity, but thrives on that scarcity. And over time, what we are going to see is all our tax money used for deeper and deeper subsidizing of a system nobody wants, which is why the issue of taking back control over the food system becomes so important. And this kind of assessment, I really feel the true cost accounting of the industrial agriculture in terms of health, in terms of soil, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of pollinators, in terms of water pollution, in terms of climate emissions, it really needs to be done in this country. And, the university is a perfect place where kids are doing. I have a team of researchers. I have 4 researchers with me. We will work with millions of farmers. This is my colleague and me wrote this without a budget because we just wanted, and I got the agriculture minister to write the foreword. I said, why are you blowing up our scarce money to destroy this planet and the earth and our health and wipe out farmers in the process? Because all of these multiple problems come from the same source, and all the solutions come from a system that we are trying to grow.
We'll take one more question, and then Dr. Shiva will be outside at the book signing table, and then you'll be free to speak with her then. We have the final question, please.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva, for joining us tonight and creating the space for us all to learn and be educated in these important topics. I really like to view the concept of nurturing your seeds as going farther than just like a physical seed and how it can stem to all facets of our life. So I wanted to ask you personally, how do you nurture your seeds every day, and what's a way that we as a society can nurture our seeds daily to strive towards a permaculture thriving ecosystem?
So what I've done over the last 30 years through building Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, but it also means the new gift, and I see it as the new gift of the commons, is we've created 120 community seed banks. We've reclaimed seed from privatization to sharing in the commons. It has also meant that when a drought comes, we have the seeds to grow. When a cyclone and hurricane comes, we have salt-tolerant seeds, which we can share. And anywhere where farmers have saved their seeds or reclaimed their seed, there's not a single suicide. The suicides are only in areas where farmers have become dependent on purchase of seeds linked to purchase of chemicals and selling of commodities, because the three go together. The proprietary seed, the chemicals, and commodities that earn you nothing. I think the biggest, and I've let the seed be my teacher. It guides me. Go here now. No, don't go there. Go this way. Is we realize that till the seed is connected to those who eat, not just those who save the seed, we will not be able to honor the seed with the full potential that it has to provide abundance. One seed can give you 1,000,000 seeds, which is why the millets are called millets. It's derived from million. One seed, 1,000,000 seeds. Terminator is a fear of the reproductive capacity of seed. It's basically an attempt to say, don't reproduce, don't multiply. The seed wants to reproduce, wants to multiply. And when we are eating food from real seed, we are eating real food. We're growing real community. And it's not a museum issue. It's not an issue of, it's not like your pet rock crystal. I know in this country there's a lot of that, yeah. but it is the amazing creativity of the earth, of millions of years of the past evolution, holding in it the future. Seed holds the future.
Thank you again, Dr. Shiva.